In Berlin, she played an unbelievable. It's amazing what she's doing, and also it's a good thing for tennis.
2 top 10 victories in just 48 hours on grass, achieved by a player who, only 3 weeks earlier, had never won a grass court title in her career.
My last matter proved to be very difficult for me, so I hope to prepare and make some improvements.
Alex Eala walked off the court in Berlin on June 19 after defeating the world's number 2 and number 8 players within the span of a single weekend. At that moment, the WTA rankings were already shifting towards something historic. The number that matters today isn't the scoreline from either match, it's the number beside her name in the Wimbledon draw, 29. That seed carries historic significance. It makes Alex Eala the first Filipina ever to earn a seeded position at a Grand Slam, across any era, any draw, and any of the 4 major championships. Yet the most remarkable part isn't the number itself. It's how quickly everything came together. In just a few weeks, Eala transformed from a promising young talent into one of the players the tennis world can no longer afford to overlook.
I think I'm getting better. Some weeks are better than others, and being exposed to this kind of level more often really pushes you to your limits.
The story isn't written by the ranking beside her name. It's written by the tape beneath it. 4 matches in 5 days. A series of performances that changed the way the tennis world viewed Alexandra Eala. One opponent she had recently lost to, then figured out. Another waiting in the opening round at Wimbledon, who has already beaten her before. That's why this is the section of the draw no one in the locker room wants to underestimate. Just 3 weeks before Berlin, Eala was defeated by Elena Rybakina in straight sets at the Italian Open. That result makes what happened next even more significant. When they met again in the Berlin round of 16, Eala didn't simply pull off an upset. She completed a transformation. The victory was built on careful preparation, match analysis, and adjustments made in just 4 weeks. She turned a recent defeat into a statement win, defeating Rybakina 7-5, 6-4. But the foundation for that breakthrough was laid a match earlier. Before the headlines focused on Rybakina, Eala had already delivered one of the tournament's most overlooked victories. In the opening round, she faced Donna Vekic, fresh off her Queen's Club title, and widely considered one of the hottest grass court players on tour. While much of the tennis world expected Vekic to carry that momentum deep into Berlin, Eala stopped her in straight sets, sending an early warning that something special was unfolding. By the time the official Wimbledon seedings were released a few days later, placing Eala at number 29, the decision almost felt inevitable. The work had already been done on the court. Berlin had provided the proof, and the rankings simply caught up with what her performances had already earned. Wimbledon's main draw begins today, and Alexandra Eala enters the tournament after a 9-day break from competitive tennis. That is the timeline that matters. Her remarkable run in Berlin is still fresh, but now the challenge shifts to the sport's biggest stage. Standing at the top of the draw is world number 1 Aryna Sabalenka, the tournament's top seed. A multiple-time Grand Slam champion, with one of the most powerful serves in women's tennis, Sabalenka is the favorite for good reason. Nothing about Eala's rise changes that reality. At the same time, the Sabalenka arriving at Wimbledon in 2026 is not quite the same player who dominated the tour 2 years earlier. Her French Open campaign ended in the quarterfinals with a loss to Diana Schneider, and afterward she openly admitted that the defeat left her in what she described as a very deep, dark hole mentally. Those were her own words. Just days before Wimbledon, Sabalenka also spoke candidly about the pressure of expectations and the mental demands of staying at the top of the sport. It was a reminder that even the world's best players carry doubts and burdens that rarely show up on the scoreboard. One point should also be made with complete accuracy. Throughout the verified Wimbledon pre-tournament media cycle, Sabalenka has made no public comments about Alexandra Eala. The only notable remarks she has made about the Filipina came last year during an ABS-CBN documentary filmed around the Miami Open, where she spoke positively and respectfully about Eala's potential. This story, then, is not about a personal rivalry. It is about the draw itself. It is about two players whose paths could eventually cross, and what Eala's recent performances have done to reshape the conversation around that possibility. The conflict in this story isn't personal. There is no feud. It's about the draw. It's about the unforgiving geometry of a Grand Slam bracket, and what happens when an in-form player lands in the wrong section of it. The argument for calling Alexandra Eala the most dangerous lower seed in the field doesn't come from press conferences or player quotes. It comes from the evidence. It comes from Berlin. And that's where the story truly begins. Look at the numbers first. Between June 16th and June 20th, Eala played 4 matches in just 96 hours on grass. She won 3 of them, including back-to-back victories over top 10 opponents. It was one of the most impressive stretches of tennis of her young career. Yet the first match is the one that often gets overlooked. On June 16th, Eala opened her Berlin campaign against Donna Vekic in the round of 32. Just days earlier, Vekic had captured the Queen's Club title and arrived in Berlin as one of the hottest grass-court players on the WTA Tour. Many analysts viewed her as a legitimate contender for another deep run. Eala ended that momentum with a composed 7-5, 6-4 victory. That win mattered more than most people realized. Long before the headlines celebrated her upset over Aryna Sabalenka, Eala had already eliminated the player many expected to benefit most from the draw. Her breakthrough didn't begin with one famous victory. It began with the match that made the next one possible. 2 days later came the challenge everyone was watching. Across the net stood Aryna Sabalenka, then the world number 2 and the 2022 Wimbledon champion. Only a few weeks earlier, Sabalenka had defeated Eala at the Italian Open. Berlin offered an immediate opportunity for redemption. This time, the result was different. Eala produced one of the finest performances of her career, defeating Sabalenka 7-5, 6-4 in a match that showcased far more than determination. It revealed growth. Beating a player like Sabalenka requires more than power. This is the point where casual fans see an upset, but coaches see something entirely different. They see adjustment. And that distinction changes everything. An upset can happen once. An adjustment changes what a player is capable of from that moment forward. In just 4 weeks, Alexandra Eala and her team solved a tactical puzzle that has frustrated much of the WTA Tour against Aryna Sabalenka. They didn't rely on luck or a single brilliant afternoon. They studied, adapted, and executed a new game plan under pressure. By the time the match ended, the version of Eala standing across the net was not the same player Sabalenka had faced at the Italian Open. That created another challenge for the rest of the field. Her next opponent had barely 24 hours to prepare for a player who had just revealed an entirely new level of her game, one that simply hadn't existed on tape the day before. And that brings us to the defining chapter of Berlin. Everything up to this point has been about the evidence, the match results, the statistics, and the timeline. What came next changed something much bigger than a tournament run. It changed how Alexandra Eala was viewed within the sport. The day after defeating Sabalenka, she faced world number 8 Aryna Sabalenka in the quarterfinals. Svitolina is one of the toughest competitors to break down. Her game is built on absorbing pace, extending rallies, and forcing opponents into one extra shot, then another, until they lose patience. For years, she has made powerful attackers play tennis on her terms. Eala never allowed that to happen. She controlled the tempo from the opening exchanges and earned a convincing 6-3, 6-4 victory. There were no dramatic comebacks, no deciding set, and no tiebreaks. It was a composed, straight-sets performance against one of the most accomplished defenders on the tour. That victory carried significance beyond the scoreboard. It was the result that reshaped the Wimbledon seedings. When the Wimbledon seedings were announced, the number beside Alexandra Eala's name represented far more than a ranking. She became the first Filipina ever to be seeded at a Grand Slam tournament. Not the first to qualify for a major. Not the first to win a match. The first to arrive at one of tennis's biggest stages with a seed next to her name. There was no historical precedent to compare it to. The record book had never contained that entry until now. After her run in Berlin, Eala put the achievement into perspective with a simple message during her on-court interview. "It's nothing compared to what my parents have sacrificed to bring me here." Those were her words, spoken moments after another career-defining victory. They captured the humility behind one of the biggest milestones in Philippine tennis history. But a seeding guarantees nothing once the tournament begins. That is the other lesson Berlin teaches. Eala opens her Wimbledon campaign against Renata Zarazua of Mexico, a player who has already beaten her in a 3-set match on hard courts during an earlier stage of Eala's development. It may not be the most talked about matchup in the draw, but it is significant enough to demand respect. A number beside a player's name doesn't win first-round matches. Only the tennis does. That is what makes Eala such a fascinating player entering Wimbledon. The threat she poses to the rest of the field is undeniable after what she accomplished in Berlin. At the same time, the danger waiting for her in the opening round is just as real. Both realities can exist together. For a broader analytical perspective, ESPN's tennis coverage offered an important observation following Eala's Birmingham title earlier in the grasscourt season. Their argument was that the championship wasn't simply a feel-good result, it was evidence of genuine development. Berlin reinforced that conclusion. The improvements were no longer isolated to one tournament. The evidence pointed to more than just better results. It pointed to a broader, more complete game. Analysts highlighted measurable improvements across every key area of Eala's tennis: a wider and more aggressive return position, greater confidence behind her second serve under pressure, and a drop shot used not as a desperate escape, but as a deliberate tactical weapon to disrupt her opponent's rhythm. Those weren't isolated flashes of brilliance. They were signs of a player expanding her arsenal. Coverage of Eala's historic seeding reflected that same conclusion from another perspective. Just Women's Sports focused on the significance of the number 29 beside her name, emphasizing that she had become the first Filipina ever to earn a Grand Slam seed. The outlet paired her achievement with Emma Raducanu's seeding, presenting two different national storylines arriving at Wimbledon from opposite sides of the draw. Two respected outlets. Two different angles. One consistent conclusion. The story isn't that Alexandra Eala suddenly caught fire. The story is that her game has grown, and the results are finally catching up to the level she has been building toward on the practice court for months. That is the analytical case, not the reaction of fans, not the excitement of highlight reels, but the conclusion reached by journalists and analysts who cover professional tennis week after week. Now widen the lens to the tournament itself. If there is one Grand Slam where recent form on grass can outweigh rankings, it is Wimbledon. History has shown that grass rewards players who arrive with confidence and momentum on the surface. Marketa Vondrousova captured the 2023 Wimbledon title after entering the tournament unseeded, while Barbora Krejcikova lifted the trophy in 2024 after beginning the event from a relatively low seeding. That pattern isn't a coincidence. It is a reflection of the surface itself. Grass doesn't reward what a player accomplished months ago on hard. Alexandra Eala fits that profile, as well as any player outside the world's top 20. She arrives at Wimbledon carrying a grasscourt title from Birmingham, 2 victories over top 10 opponents in a 48-hour span at Berlin, and a number 29 seed that places her in the same section of the draw as players ranked well above her. On paper, they own the higher rankings. On grass, however, many of them enter the tournament without the recent match experience Eala has built over the past few weeks. That is why her name stands out. The significance of her rise extends well beyond the draw itself. Across the Philippines, her historic seeding has become a national sporting milestone. ABS-CBN, GMA, Rappler, the Philippine Daily Inquirer, and other major outlets have highlighted the achievement, while Filipino tennis fans across social media have celebrated her victory over Aryna Sabalenka as one of the defining moments in the country's tennis history. Those reactions are not the story by themselves. They are the soundtrack to it. For years, Philippine tennis has waited for a breakthrough on the sport's biggest stage. Now, it finally has won. Still, the Berlin run was not perfect, and acknowledging that is part of telling the story honestly. After 3 consecutive victories, including back-to-back wins over top 10 opponents, Eala reached the semifinals, where she faced Linda Noskova. It was her 4th match in 5 days, and the physical demands of the week finally caught up with her. Noskova claimed the match in straight sets, 6-2, 6-4. There is no need to invent a deeper explanation. Sometimes the simplest one is enough. A player who has spent 3 straight days defeating elite opponents on one of the fastest surfaces in tennis eventually runs into the limits of recovery. Fatigue is part of the sport, and Berlin demanded plenty of it. The good news is that Wimbledon arrives after a 9-day recovery period. That is enough time to recover physically, but not so much time